Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Paribrajakacharyasto Tarasata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 44, Text 30. Janāḥ sarve karmaṇā rāma-kṛṣṇayoḥ rite kaṁsam vipra-mukhyāḥ sādhavaḥ sādhu sādviti janāḥ prajahṛṣuḥ sarve karmaṇā rāma-kṛṣṇayoḥ rite kaṁsam vipra-mukhyāḥ sādhavaḥ sādhu sādviti janāḥ prajahṛṣuḥ sarve karmaṇā rāma-kṛṣṇayoḥ rite kaṁsam vipra-mukhyāḥ sādhavaḥ sādhu sādviti. Atijis? Janāḥ, the people, prajahṛṣuḥ, rejoiced, sarve, all, karmaṇā, at the deed, rāma-kṛṣṇayoḥ, of Balarāma and Kṛṣṇa, rite, except, kaṁsam, Kaṁsa, vipra of the brāhmaṇas, mukhyāḥ, the best, sādhavaḥ, the saintly persons, sādhu, sādhu iti, exclaimed, excellent, excellent. Translation. Everyone except Kaṁsa rejoiced at the wonderful feat Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma had performed. The exalted Brahmins and great saints exclaimed, excellent, excellent. We can repeat together. Everyone except Kaṁsa rejoiced at the wonderful feat Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma had performed. The exalted Brahmins and great saints exclaimed, excellent, excellent. Purport. It is understood that as the best of the Brahmins and saints were exclaiming, excellent, excellent, the worst of the Brahmins, namely Kaṁsa's priests, were seriously grieving. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantekam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're so fortunate to be just a few minutes away from where this pastime took place. Now, as the residents of Vrindavan were suffering terribly, actually they were terrified that Krishna wouldn't return here to Vrindavan. In the meantime, the cowherd boys, the cowherd men, Nanda, Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma, they had gone to the arena to take part on this day, this Chaturdasi. Today was supposed to be the big sacrifice to Rangeshwar Mahadev, but things didn't turn out the way Kaṁsa planned. The demons, they have big plans for victory. And in order to fulfill their plans, they have their supporting Brahmins. We have many instances of that in the past. And you'd be surprised to hear that demons are also in the Brahmin Varna. We have excellent examples of that. Ravana, Mahapandit Ravana, his father was a Brahmin. But because the father did not perform the disciplinary activities at the time of birth, Ravana was a Rakshasa. Hiranyakashipu, he was also the son of the Brahmin Kashyapa. But again, because Diti, she neglected every single disciplinary activity that could possibly be imagined, he was born as the greatest Rakshasa. Now you have even closer, if you go to Mathura, Kaṁsa's fort is still there. You can stand on top of Kaṁsa's fort. And looking across the beautiful Jamuna River, just on the northern side, you'll see Durvasa Muni's ashram. Durvasa Muni, he was practically partial incarnation of Lord Shiva himself. But when the great emperor, Maharaj Ambardish, came here for 1 year, he was staying in Madhuban. And he and his illustrious wife, who had the same qualities as her husband, they performed the Ekadasi and Dwadasi Vrat for 1 full year. And just at the end of that Vrat, they were going to break their fast on Dwadasi day. Durvasa Muni decides to come and visit. Now Durvasa Muni was actually envious of the Kshatriya emperor, Maharaj Ambarish, that he has performed such great austerities for the benefit of all, but we're the Brahmins. We're greater than the Kshatriyas. So his plan was to disassemble this entire vrat that Maharaj Ambarish had performed. And therefore, when Maharaj Ambarish offered his respects, asked him to take prasadam, he said, I'm just going to go bathe at the Jamuna, which is quite far from Madhuban. So he went, he took his time, he was meditating on the impersonal Brahman. Within that time, it took him till noon. And we know that the parayana for the Ekadasi is early in the morning, the particular muhurt. So Ambarish Maharaj, he didn't know what to do. The Brahmins also didn't know what to do. So Maharaj Ambarish himself decided, I'll just sip some water, because if you take water, that's fasting and not fasting. So he drank some water. When Durvasa Muni came back, he was enraged. He could understand that you've broken the fast. You have no respect for the Brahmins. And he pulled out of his hair, he threw it on the ground, and a huge demon appeared to kill Maharaj Ambarish. Maharaj Ambarish took no retaliation whatsoever. He simply prayed to Vishnu. Now, Vishnu we know, because we've been hearing that Kaṁsa, his whole meditation was Vishnu holding the Sudarshan Chakra in his hand. That Sudarshan Chakra is specifically there to kill the demons. And the Sudarshan Chakra is indiscriminate. He doesn't care if it's a Brahmin demon or a Sudra demon. And Vishnu himself had given his chakra to Ambarish. So when Durvasa Muni's demon came to kill Ambarish, immediately the Sudarshan Chakra came, killed that demon on the spot, and came to kill Durvasa Muni as well, the Brahmin. Durvasa Muni ran everywhere. His only way of saving himself, as told by Vishnu, was to come and offer his apologies to Ambarish Maharaj. So here we have another great demon, Kaṁsa. Kaṁsa had been performing the most horrendous offenses against Kṛṣṇa, against the Brahmins, against the devotees, everyone, just so that he could maintain his supremacy over all the kings. Now finally, by his big plans, he had brought Kṛṣṇa to kill him. And Kṛṣṇa was just a few steps away. When Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma entered the arena with the tusks on their shoulders, Kṛṣṇa showed no respect whatsoever to Kaṁsa. He walked over to him, holding the tusks, and he looked at him. He said, "Who is he?" And then he turned away, and he looked at all the people in the arena. And everyone saw him according to their different rasas. Some were completely indifferent to him. They had no joy, they had no fear, nothing. That's the problem with Mathura. Mathura is mixed. Some actually were aggressively opponent to Kṛṣṇa, and they were waiting for him to be killed. And others, the devotees, according to their love for Kṛṣṇa, they saw him in different ways. So then when Kṛṣṇa engaged in the battle with Chanura and Balarāma and Muṣṭika, they very easily killed them. They were playing. It was fun for them. Kṛṣṇa, he was attracting everyone by his blissful activities, his beauty. And Balarāma, seeing Kṛṣṇa becoming a little fatigued, he became very angry. So he was the angry attitude of Kṛṣṇa in the form of Balarāma. That's why his eyes were copper red. So finally, when Kṛṣṇa heard that there was so much objection amongst the ladies, amongst the Brahmins were cursing themselves that, oh, we're so weak. Because of our fear of Kaṁsa, we can't stop this terrible activity. It's so unfair that Kaṁsa has done this. Actually, by that time, everyone in the whole arena was condemning Kaṁsa for having these two boys fight against these powerful wrestlers. Everyone. So now was the perfect time to kill the wrestlers. The wrestlers themselves were condemning Kaṁsa. First, they condemned Kaṁsa. They said, what type of a king is this? Here are these gentle little boys. They live in the jungle. They don't know anything about wrestling. They're so weak. And they want us, who are the most powerful wrestlers, to fight with these little boys. So they said, this king, what has he done? So they thought they were just dealing with young little boys. But then as Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma began fighting, and they saw the strength and the skill of Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma, they doubly condemned Kaṁsa. That didn't Kaṁsa know who these two boys actually are? Did he want us to be killed by them? So they didn't know. Simply everyone was condemning Kaṁsa. So then Kṛṣṇa very easily, Chanura, he was looking at Kaṁsa, at Kṛṣṇa. Kṛṣṇa by that time, although all of Chanura's organs had been battered to bits by Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa had no injuries, he had no sweating, no fatigue, and he had no swelling in his body either. Whereas normally if you're being battered, there's swelling, there's hurt, but Kṛṣṇa had none of these things. So he very easily picked up Chanura, swung him around, threw him on the ground, and he was dead. And then Balarāma did the same to Muṣṭika. So seeing the two wrestlers dead, everyone was cheering. They were amazed that these two little boys had killed these powerful wrestlers. And then the other brothers of Chanura and Muṣṭika came. Kuta, killed by Balarāma with his left hand, left foot. Then Sala and Tosala, killed by Kṛṣṇa, also left hand, left foot, just splitting them in half. Now the major wrestlers were dead. The other wrestlers, it's compared that sometimes when the kings would go out into the jungle to fight, they would have a pack of dogs with them. And they would hide, and they would send their dogs to go get the lion or the tiger. So these wrestlers were just like Kaṁsa's dogs, going to try to capture Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma and kill them. But Kaṁsa, he was hiding. He was such a coward. Even Kṛṣṇa said, if you're such a great man, why didn't you come to the gate and fight with us? Why did you have Kuvalayapi to get killed by us? So Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma knew exactly what a coward Kaṁsa was. Now, the other wrestlers, when they saw that the most powerful wrestlers had been killed, they had two choices. Either they would be killed by Kaṁsa, because if they ran away, Kaṁsa would surely kill them, or they would be killed by Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. So they realized that Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma were stronger than Kaṁsa, and they fled for their lives. Now, Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma were coming to this part of the story. Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma are looking at Kaṁsa. The music is still going on. Two kinds of music. The music that Kaṁsa had commissioned, that's the general musicians in Mathura, and the demigods, they were watching everything from above. They were playing music, they were celebrating, the wives of the demigods were dancing, and their music, although Kaṁsa tried to stop the music, their music didn't stop. So Kṛṣṇa, he took advantage of this wonderful situation, and he called all of his boyfriends. And for about a half an hour, with that music playing, they wrestled, they danced, they jumped, and Kṛṣṇa, just to show the power of his friends, he allowed his friends to defeat him. Kṛṣṇa was on the ground, and his friends were defeating him in wrestling. and Kaṁsa was watching this. He realized the power of these cowherd boys and the power of Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. He couldn't tolerate it. Now, two different types of Brahmins are being described here. That is the Brahmins, the vipra-mukhyāḥs, those who appreciated Kṛṣṇa and loved him. And although out of fear previously, they couldn't do anything to show their affection for Kṛṣṇa, now they were yelling all together, "Sādhu, sādhu!" Excellent, excellent. The Brahmins who were supporters of Kaṁsa, because from the beginning of the creation you'll find Brahmins like that. We have some other examples. For instance, in the arena of Daksha. Daksha was a Brahmin, but he was very envious of his son-in-law, Shiva. So when Daksha came to execute the sacrifice, all the universal Brahmins, sadhus, demigods had come. When Daksha entered, and the pure devotee, Shiva, who was meditating on the Supreme Lord in his heart, did not offer him respects, although everyone else stood. Even Brahmaji offered him respects. Daksha could not tolerate what he considered a great offense, and he cursed Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva did not retaliate, but Lord Shiva's followers did, and they counter-cursed Daksha. So there was a great, in arenas, everyone comes to show their powers. So the Brahmins, they were showing their mystic powers of cursing and counter-cursing. And Nandishwar, he said, this man is so attached to his sex life, he's so attached to his sense gratification, that soon he will have the head of a goat. He predicted it. He cursed him like that. And then he cursed all the Brahmins who were supporting Daksha, who smiled, who moved their eyebrows when Daksha was cursing Lord Shiva. He cursed them all, that they will have no entrance into transcendental knowledge. They'll simply be interested in maintaining their bodies. All their begging, everything will just be to enjoy this gramya sukha. So all this counter-cursing and cursing going on, Lord Shiva just stood up and walked out. Now, the core for death is offense. Kaṁsa had committed so many offenses. Just as Daksha, he had committed so many offenses. Anyone who commits offense to the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, of a pure devotee, that dust can work in two ways. The dust can give blessings, or the dust can condemn one to death if one is offensive to the pure devotee. So because Daksha was offensive, because Kaṁsa was so offensive, their death was guaranteed. Bali Maharaj, he also, although he was a demon, his grandfather was Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj was also born amongst the demons. And Prabhupada, he gives a proverb. He said, where ignorance is bliss, it is folly to be wise. So because the demons, they accept ignorance to be their bliss. That means sense gratification, to be the goal of life. When one is wise, as Prahlad was, it's a folly, because his father was going to kill him for his devotion and wisdom. Sanda and Amarka, who were sons of Sukracharya, when Hiranyakashipu threatened them that you find out who has polluted my son, who has contaminated him with this Vaishnava philosophy, they first tried to very sweetly find out from Prahlad, who has done this to you? Who has turned you against our own principles? When Prahlad didn't speak, then they took out the stick and they threatened him. Now these were Brahmins. Sukracharya, Sukracharya was the son of Vedasira. We had heard of Vedasira at the Kaliya Leela. Vedasira had been cursed by Ashvasira to become a snake. Now again, this cursing and counter-cursing amongst the Brahmins is constantly going on because they all try to show their opulence of mystic perfections. So Sukracharya, he, although being a qualified Brahmin, because he assisted the demons, he was the guru of the demons, such as Bali Maharaj. Now Bali Maharaj, he was trying to attain heaven without performing the austerities that one must undergo to attain heaven, because in heaven, that's where the devatas or the suras live. So he was killed, but Sukracharya brought him back to life with the Sanjivani mantra. And then Sukracharya and all of his Brahmins who were supporting the demons. Now why did they support the demons? Because the demons were maintaining them with money. If the demons became weak, then how would these Brahmins be able to live a comfortable life? So it was a symbiotic relationship. The demons needed the Brahmins for their blessings, and the Brahmins needed the demons so that they could live a nice life. So they had both that had very, very, very internal interests, self-interests. So then the Brahmins, they gave Bali all support. They had him perform a big sacrifice, and from the heavens came a chariot, came weapons, came horses, and then Prahlad Maharaj gave Bali an eternal garland. Sukracharya gave him the conch of victory. And Bali Maharaj, the demigods didn't even dare to fight with him. They fled. They fled in fear of their lives, and Bali Maharaj was able to take over. So sometimes, with the blessings of Brahmins who have self-interest, the demons become very, very powerful. And here we have Kaṁsa. Kaṁsa is described that when one has material desires, they have no interest in worshiping Lord Vishnu. Actually, Kaṁsa hated Vishnu. So he took shelter of Lord Shiva, and his Ishtadev was Rangeshwar Mahadev. And that was why he made this wrestling arena right at the place where Rangeshwar Mahadev was worshipped. The bow of Lord Shiva was being worshipped there as well. Now, where did this bow come from? How did Shiva get this powerful bow? When Shiva had to fight at the Tripura Asura demons, Lord Vishnu himself gave his bow to him to defeat them. So actually this was Vishnu's bow, but it was given to Lord Shiva. Now Krishna, as Vishnu, he easily broke that bow in half, putting fear in the heart of Kaṁsa. Then, coming to the arena on that day, although the sacrifice was supposed to be performed for the pleasure of Rangeshwar Mahadev, actually, when Kaṁsa died, Rangeshwar Mahadev rejoiced along with all the other devotees because he's the greatest devotee. He wasn't trying to help Lord Shiva. He was simply observing how his Supreme Lord, Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma, were able to kill this great demon Kaṁsa. So we have here the two different types of Brahmins. Those who are supporting the demons for their own self-interest. And now finally, these Brahmins who had lived in fear of Kaṁsa for so many years, when Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma displayed their prowess and displayed their sweetness, they became brave enough, courageous enough to defy Kaṁsa and shout out, "Sādhu, Sādhu," because they were really devotees of Kṛṣṇa. Even when Kṛṣṇa was in the forest nearby and his friends were hungry, and he sent them to the Brahmins. The Brahmins refused to give any food. Then he sent them to the wives of the Brahmins. The wives of the Brahmins, they didn't just send the food, they came themselves. They were ready to live in the forest for the rest of their lives just because they wanted to please Krishna. So when the wives came back, the Brahmins, they were condemning themselves. Dig, to hell with our life, to hell with our sacrifices, to hell with our position as Brahmins. Why? Because we did not recognize the Supreme Lord. We lost the opportunity to serve him. And they didn't even at that time go to see Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma because they were so afraid of Kaṁsa. Now that fear was gone. Kaṁsa, being proven to be a coward, he shrunk in fear at seeing Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma now having defeated all of the wrestlers. And he could not tolerate that the music was still going on, that the cowherd boys and Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma were rejoicing their victory. And he put up his left hand. He said, "Stop, stop, stop this music." And then he put the noose around his own neck. He started to offend the Vaishnavas. Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma were standing there. They continued jumping up and down. But Kaṁsa, he wanted all of this rejoicing to stop. He said, "Drive these boys into the jungle. Drive them out of the city." Now, Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma were very happy with that. They didn't want to come in the first place, but they had a duty to perform. They had to kill Kaṁsa. So that was his first offense. Drive them out of the city. Then, Nanda and the cowherd men. Now, Kaṁsa, because of diplomatic training, he understood that wealth and power go together. You can see, even in present days, even if someone's completely unqualified, a total rascal and fool, if he's rich, he's worshipped by everyone. His name comes in the newspaper every day, just because he's the wealthiest person in the world. So Kaṁsa understood, if I want to increase my power, I have to increase my wealth at the same time. So according to him, as the king, everything belonged to him, even the wealth of Nanda Maharaj. So his next attack was on Nanda Maharaj. Not to kill Nanda Maharaj, he said, "Capture this Nanda Maharaj. Bind him in iron chains. Take all of his wealth away. Take all the wealth away of the cowherd men and imprison them." Then, who's next? Vasudeva. Now, by this time, he realized that Vasudeva had tricked him. Vasudeva was worthy of being killed. This snake, Vasudeva, he promised to give me all of his sons, but he tricked me. He's a liar. He's a cheat. Kill him immediately. Krishna was just listening as the noose was getting tighter around Kaṁsa's neck. He didn't stop there. Then, right in the Sanskrit, he says, "My Pita, my father, you kill him too, because he has always been supporting my enemies against my will. Both of them, Vasudeva, Ugrasen, you kill them immediately." Now this, Krishna couldn't tolerate. He started to shake. This rascal, this demon, he wants to kill my father. He wants to bind Nanda Maharaj. He wants to kill the real king. So while shaking, he jumped up into the royal dais where Kaṁsa was hiding. He was trying to protect himself. He put himself above everybody else. He jumped up. He grabbed Kaṁsa by the hair. It's compared, sometimes we have this experience, we're walking down the road, and then suddenly a monkey will jump on us, grab our glasses, grab our bead bag, grab our phone. We don't know what happened, because the monkey's smarter than us. So that's what Krishna did. He grabbed Kaṁsa's hair. Kaṁsa didn't know what was happening. He was so fearful. He had his shield. He had his sword. He was moving this way and that. Kṛṣṇa didn't care. He grabbed him by the hair. His crown fell off. All of his armor just became disheveled. And then Kṛṣṇa picked him up by the hair, threw him off of the high dais, right into the arena, and jumped on him. And we know from Mother Yasoda, Kṛṣṇa has a whole universe in his stomach. So how heavy is Kṛṣṇa? He jumps on Kaṁsa. Kaṁsa's dead on the spot. But Kaṁsa was so frightened seeing Kṛṣṇa. His eyes, when he died, his eyes were wide open in fear. So the people, thousands of people in the arena, they thought Kaṁsa had just maybe fainted because his eyes were open. So Kṛṣṇa wanted to show them, no, he's dead. So then he took him, he dragged his body all over the arena, and there were different reactions to that. Everyone was saying, oh, ha, ha, because here was the king, and he was being so unillustriously dragged around the arena, while the others, the devotees, they were all cheering. They were so happy that this demon, this snake, had finally been killed by Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. So all the reactions were there. And then enter the wives. Now, we can go back to Ramayana. When Ravana, Mahapandit Ravana, was killed by Ram, how was he killed? Well, first of all, Ravana's brother told Ram the secret of how to kill him, where he was hiding his prana, where the arrow was that would kill him. He told Ram everything because Bibhishan was a devotee. He wanted Ravana to be killed. And therefore Hanuman, he went to Mandodari in the form of a Brahmin. He tricked her. He took that arrow. Mandodari realized at that time, I've been the source of my own husband's death by giving this arrow away. So this trickery goes on, this treachery, just as in the battle of Mahabharata, also the 5 arrows of Bhishma, Kṛṣṇa, he tricked Duryodhana to give those arrows to Arjuna. So this is, when we're having fights like this, there's so much diplomacy, so many tricks being performed. When Ravana was finally killed, she cursed Hanuman that as I am grieving, you will also grieve for your loved one, Ram. So therefore, he lived for so many, what is the word? Chiranjivan. He's still living here, waiting to see Ram again. So she came and she lamented that you caused your own death, Ravana. You killed innocent people. You defied all of the Shastras. You showed no respect to Ram and his beloved wife Sita. You kidnapped her. Because of all these offenses, you're now lying here on the battlefield dead. So when Asti and Prapti came, although he was their beloved husband, they knew that he had caused his own death by offending the Vaishnavas, by offending the Supreme Lord, by killing innocent people, by stopping the Brahmins from their sacrifices, by killing the cows, by killing the children. They could understand he had brought his own death, but he was still their husband, and according to some, Kaṁsa actually had 1,000 wives. They all came running. They were all lamenting. They were pulling out their hair because when the husband dies, the wife is also dead. So what did Asti and Prapti do? They didn't stay there in the assembly. They went after the funeral rites, and Kṛṣṇa came and apologized to them, and he said, I'm so sorry that your husband has died. I will personally perform the rites. He dragged the body. 100 elephants couldn't drag Kaṁsa's body. Kṛṣṇa very easily dragged him with his left hand. He was so powerful that Kaṁsa, there's a canal where he dragged his body all the way to Vishramghat. And then he didn't burn him there. He took him to the other side and burned Kaṁsa and his brothers on the northern side of Jamuna. Then he came back, tried to appease everyone, further apologies, and then Kṛṣṇa, he was anxious to get back home. He wanted to quickly install Ugrasena as the king. Ugrasena, he was feeling very offensive because his own son, he believed, was the cause of so much suffering of the devotees. So he in the assembly, he said, how can I become the king when my son has caused so much suffering to the whole kingdom? But Kṛṣṇa says, no, you have always been the king. And then he took the crown and put it on Ugrasena's head. And then he said, I will tell you my desire. 100 times I will tell you the same thing. My only desire is to return to the forest of Vrindavan and sport like a wild elephant with my friends and the cows. So please allow me to return. Now when the Yadus heard this, after Kaṁsa had died, now Ugrasena was the king, Kṛṣṇa wanted to leave immediately back to Braj. They spoke up. They said, we had one Kaṁsa before, and you have killed him. Now all of Kaṁsa's friends and ally kings, they will come to try to avenge his death. And who will protect us? Not only that, if you go back to Braj, they'll all follow you there, and all of Braj will be destroyed. So it's very good logic. Kṛṣṇa was in tears. What could he do? And meanwhile, Asti and Prapti, they had gone back to Jarasandha's home. They didn't want to stay in Mathura. And when Jarasandha saw the condition of his daughters, immediately he decided he was going to come and kill that Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. So there was no time to lose. Kṛṣṇa couldn't go back immediately. He said, all right, I will stay with you as long as you need, and then I'll go back. He went alone to Balarāma, crying. He took him to a solitary place. He said, Balarāma, please help me. You stay here. I want to go back to Vrindavan. Balarāma said, I can't live without you. I can't do anything without you. If I'm going to stay, you also have to stay. So they decided at that point they had to stay a little longer. So they sent a message. Nanda Maharaj, he sent a message back to Braj. Kaṁsa has now been killed. We'll have to spend a few more days here to get everything settled nicely. When the Brijbasis heard this, they were also rejoicing. They were so happy to greet the messengers, to hear the good news that Kaṁsa was finally dead. But then they realized, just like a stake in their heart, that Kṛṣṇa could not immediately come back. In fact, Kṛṣṇa had to become indifferent to all the inhabitants of Braja, because if the other demoniac kings realized that he was so attracted and so loving, affectionate to these Brijbasis, they would also kill them. So Kṛṣṇa had to cut all of his relations with the Brijbasis at that time and simply concentrate on his duty there in Mathura. Now, the residents of Mathura, there were 3 different categories. There were the devotees, such as Akrura, Uddhava, and the Yadus, who had just been waiting for Kṛṣṇa to come. There were those who were indifferent. They were the residents, and they had to have a king, so now they had Ugrasena. And then there were also those who were opposed to Kṛṣṇa. So those who were opposed to Kṛṣṇa, they couldn't last long in Mathura because Kṛṣṇa was now present. And they had to flee. just as the Yadus had to flee when Kaṁsa took over. They went to different parts of India. They were hiding. Now they could finally come back. So some of these others who were not favorable to Kṛṣṇa, they had to now leave Mathura. And they had to take shelter in other places. And there were many places to take shelter because Kaṁsa had made alliances with so many demoniac kings. And they were all trying to find ways to kill Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma and again take over the kingdom, just as Kalyavana when he came. Kalyavana, we know that Gargamuni, he was the Acharya of the Yadavas. But Gargamuni, he didn't have any children. So sometimes in the assembly hall, the different members, they would joke amongst each other. And this is explained later in the Srimad Bhagavatam. They would make fun of Gargamuni, that you're probably impotent, that's why you don't have any children. And he was very much insulted by this. So he decided that he would have a son that would kill the Yadus. This is Gargacharya himself. So he arranged that with the Mlecha king, who couldn't have any children, he impregnated that Mlecha king, that Yavana king, and that son was Kalyavana. And Kalyavana came to kill the Yadus. So there was a lot of, it wasn't all over when Kaṁsa died. There were so many fightings to still go on, up until the last demon was killed. Now Balarāma, just as when Lord Shiva heard that his wife had died, he pulled out his hair, he created the Virabhadra demon, which was the personification of his anger, and he sent that Virabhadra to kill Daksha for his offenses. Because Daksha, he allowed his own sinless daughter to kill herself. He didn't stop her. Just as Kaṁsa, he killed his own nephews, and he was trying to now kill the nephews Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma. So Virabhadra was the personification of Lord Shiva's anger. And Balarāma, he would oftentimes take that personification of Kṛṣṇa's anger. When after the wedding of Aniruddha and when Aniruddha married the daughter of Rukmi, and there was the chess match going on, and Rukmi tried to trick and cheat Balarāma out of winning. So Balarāma, he just very easily killed the king of Kalinga. Just out of his anger, he killed him. So sometimes Balarāma had to manifest that angry nature on behalf of Kṛṣṇa, so that Kṛṣṇa didn't have to take part in these nasty activities. Balarāma did it for him. So Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma, as a team together, they were working how to pacify everyone within Mathura. Now, when he installed Ugrasen, the Yadavas, they gave him two choices. Either you stay here and protect us, or you take us all to a place where these demoniac kings cannot attack us. So that gave Kṛṣṇa the next idea, that he was going to create Dwarka and transport all of the residents of Mathura to Dwarka. Now, it was yesterday, there was a question, how many years did Kṛṣṇa live in Mathura? So in different yugas, there are different times that Kṛṣṇa spent. For instance, in some yugas, Kṛṣṇa marries Rukmini while he was still living in Mathura. But according to what we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam that we're studying, that all happened in Dwarka. So when Kṛṣṇa had created this beautiful city of Dwarka, which was on an island that was very difficult to access, one night he transported all of the residents of Mathura to that island of Dwarka. And he and Balarāma also went there to continue to protect them from the enemies that were created when he killed Kaṁsa. So this went on for about 100 years, until finally Kṛṣṇa was able to return to Mathura Vrindavan. All of the demons had by then been killed, and Kṛṣṇa was able to fulfill his one and only desire, which was to return to the pastures of Vrindavan and take part in his eternal Leela with the cowherd boys and the gopis. Now, at this point, Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma are rejoicing. They are showing how they enjoy in Vrindavan by playing with the cowherd boys. And they're dancing, they're wrestling together. These pastimes are not the same as the spontaneous loving pastimes that Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma enact in Vrindavan. These pastimes are a display to those who never had access to see the pastimes of Vrindavan, of what goes on in the spiritual world. And it was also a last time when Kṛṣṇa could play with the cowherd boys before they returned to Braja and lived in separation from him for so many years. So this dancing and playing of Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma with the cowherd boys was very significant, both for the residents of Mathura who were watching the dancing, getting more and more attracted to Kṛṣṇa's eternal pastimes, and for the eternal associates themselves, because this would be the last time that they would have an opportunity to dance and play and wrestle with Kṛṣṇa until he wound up his pastimes in Dwarka, in Hastinapur, in Mathura, and returned to his eternal Leela with them. So everyone is enjoying. Everyone, thousands of the spectators are seeing this beautiful dancing, just increasing their love for Kṛṣṇa and Balarāma more and more. The residents of Vrindavan, it's just as if they have Kṛṣṇa as their own again, dancing with him again. But Kaṁsa cannot tolerate it. So Kaṁsa, along with all of his followers, they were bringing their own death by their offenses. And in the coming slokas, we'll hear how Kṛṣṇa very easily kills Kaṁsa, how he's able to drive all of Kaṁsa's followers out of Mathura, and eventually come back to his eternal home of Vrindavan. Any questions? Yes, Prabhu.
We hear that Kṛṣṇa, Mathura, or Kurukshetra, or Dwarka was different than the Vrindavan Kṛṣṇa. And what does it mean Kṛṣṇa never leaves Vrindavan? What does that mean? Never, not even one step out of Vrindavan.
Yes, Kṛṣṇa never leaves Vrindavan. He's still here, but we can't see him. We don't have the eyes, the premanjana churita, bhakti vilochanena, santas sadaiva hridayesha. The saints can see Kṛṣṇa dancing here. We can't see him. So Kṛṣṇa is here. This is his eternal abode. And Kṛṣṇa has two different types of expansions, his Vaibhav and his Prabhav. Now, even Prabhupada would mix those two different, but the Vaibhav, one of them is Kṛṣṇa, when he performs his different Leelas. And it's the same, he looks the same, but he's performing different Leelas. Just as when he was living in the 16,108 palaces with his wives. They were all the same Kṛṣṇa, but he was performing different Leelas in each home. So there's only one Kṛṣṇa. And then the Prabhavs, they looked, or one or the other, I forget which, even Prabhupada would forget. They don't look like Kṛṣṇa, like Balarāma, like all of the different types of incarnations. So the original Kṛṣṇa, Shyamasundar, he is always here, enjoying with his devotees in Vrindavan. But his expansions, and that's why that important Leela at the Akrura Ghat, when we hear that at that place, Kṛṣṇa returned to Vrindavan in his bhava form, to live in the minds of his devotees. And the Vasudeva form went on to perform the Leela in Mathura. So absolutely, Krishna never takes a step out of Vrindavan, but through his expansions, he's able to carry on with his pastimes elsewhere. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful class. You were mentioning about Kaṁsa because of his own offenses. You were mentioning about Kaṁsa being killed because of his own offenses.
His what?
You mentioned how Kaṁsa was killed because of his own offenses.
Yes.
And in this context, you narrated twice the Daksha Shiva Leela, the Daksha and Shiva's pastime.
Yes.
So it said that even after Daksha was punished and got a goat's body,
Yes.
he asked forgiveness from Shiva.
Yes.
But
That's right.
still, in the next birth, he got a Kshatriya body and he committed offense to Narad Muni.
Yes.
And he said that because of the previous sinful offensive reaction. So why did Daksha, although he asked forgiveness, why he was not free from that reaction?
Well, Daksha was a progenitor, and he had a particular order from his father to create progeny. And he was very expert in sex life. And anyone who's engaged in such activities, their mind becomes polluted. So although he begged forgiveness, just because you ask forgiveness once, it doesn't mean that you can't continue to commit offenses to the devotees. It can happen again and again and again. That's why Srila Prabhupada was so merciful that even when the devotees would commit offense, he would bring them back and engage them in service again. Because Daksha, being engaged in that service that was given to him by his father, his mind again became polluted. And he cursed Narada Muni because he felt that Narada Muni had unjustly caused his sons to give up before they even experienced the pains and the the misery of grihastha life. So therefore his mind again became polluted, and again he committed offense at the lotus feet of a pure devotee, Narada Muni.
Can I ask another question?
Yes?
In this context, you are mentioning about the Swayam Bhagavan, who never leaves Vrindavan.
Swayam?
Bhagavan, who never leaves Vrindavan.
Yes.
So in that expansion, there is a Swayam Prakash, which is Vaibhava Prakash, and
Yeah.
Prakash.
If you let me read, then I'll be able to, I didn't memorize that, all the different types of Vaibhav, Prabhav, and those things. I don't know the different terms, but you can easily look it up in Chaitanya Charitamrita and get the answer. All right? Yes, Prabhu?
We hear a lot about this cursing and counter-cursing.
Yes.
Does it still work nowadays in Kama-yoga?
Oh.
And what about if somebody gets angry and asks some negative feelings towards us and he's a brāhmana? Is it some sort of curse?
Yes, when the devotees first came here, they were a little bewildered because there are tirtha gurus here. Tirtha gurus means the pandas who take you around, and they offer you so many blessings as soon as you start giving them money. So they asked Prabhupada about these Brahmins, and he said, they're not tirtha gurus, they're tirtha garos. That means, garo means cow in Bengali. He said, neither their blessings nor their curses, neither work. And there was a very interesting, I didn't have time, but here in Vrindavan we have the Advaita Gosais and the Nityananda Bunks, Advaita Bunks, Nityananda Bunks. And when these young boys used to come to see Prabhupada at the Radha Damodar temple, Prabhupada was very affectionate to them. And he would give them prasadam, he would even give them money, a little pie, 1/3 of a paisa, so that they could go get some rubbery. And even one of them, of the Advaita Gosai family, he was friends with Prabhupada was friends with the family, he went to their soccer match, and like that, very close. So when Prabhupada came back with his disciples, all the boys got together because they knew Prabhupada from when they were little boys. And they challenged Prabhupada. And they said, isn't it true that only the real born Brahmins can perform the rites, the Purohit, Pandit, Pujari services? And Prabhupada immediately said, no, that's not what Lord Chaitanya taught. It's according to one's deeds, one's karma. A Krishna Bhakta is better than a Brahmin who does not perform his deeds as a Brahmin. So then they further challenged Prabhupada, that isn't it true that the offspring of a snake is always a snake? That the offspring of a cow is always a calf? And the offspring of a Brahmin is always a Brahmin? Because even if we don't perform our deeds as a Brahmin, we still have that power of the Brahmin within us. Very proud. And Prabhupada said, no, that's not what Lord Chaitanya taught. You have to, it is only the Krishna Bhakti and the deeds performed by the Brahmin that make a Brahmin. So because they loved Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was speaking, and they were Advaita and Nityananda ones, they accepted what Prabhupada said. And although when the temple was opened here, in the very beginning, they all refused to come to the bandaras and come to our services because they didn't feel that Prabhupada's disciples were true Brahmins. Gradually, seeing the good work of the temple, their minds changed, and they even come, now we have big bandaras, and all of the sadhus and the saints and the Brahmins come. They've accepted Lord Chaitanya's teachings by the example that Prabhupada has given. Okay? Hare Krishna. Shall we go on, or everyone wants to go take prasadam? One more. Whose hand? Put your hand up.
Hare Krishna. Mataji, you just said that Vrindavan is Krishna's eternal abode.
Yes.
Krishna doesn't live Vrindavan.
Yes.
So is this Vrindavan not different than Guru Vrindavan? And if yes,
I couldn't hear what you said.
Is this Vrindavan not different than Guru Vrindavan?
Non-different, that's right.
And if yes, then why is said that we should go back to Godhead? Why can't we live here happily?
Yes, you can go back to Godhead without dying. You can go back to Godhead in this very lifetime. It's a matter of purifying the senses. To have jnana chakshus and that premanjana. The 6 Goswamis, they were always back to Godhead. They were engaged in their eternal lila while still in the form of renounced Goswamis. In their meditations, they were in their manjari forms serving Radha and Krishna. So that is up to you whether you want to go back to Godhead in this lifetime or not. By following the instructions of your spiritual master, he can bless you with that spiritual vision of seeing Krishna's pastimes while you're engaged in your spiritual master's service. So that's entirely in your hands. You don't have to die and go somewhere else to go back to Godhead. You can go back to Godhead this very instant by following the instructions of your spiritual master purely. And he will bless you with that vision. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, thank you for the wonderful class. My question is related that Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. So why gopis couldn't see Krishna when he was present in Vrindavan? I mean, is it an yoga maya covering Krishna, or what was the reason that gopis, Mother Yashoda, residents of Vrindavan couldn't see Krishna?
They would see Krishna.
But they were in agony, they were in distress because Krishna was not in Vrindavan. Why Krishna was in Mathura?
No, Krishna was in their heart. That was to increase. This was the whole reason why Krishna left Vrindavan, to bring them to the topmost platform, that they were able to keep Krishna in their heart through this vipra-mukhyāḥ. And this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us in his pastimes at Jagannath Puri. This paramount of love is experienced in vipra-mukhyāḥ, not in sambho.
So then Krishna left Vrindavan then? Because
No, Krishna was in the heart of every devotee in Vrindavan. And they were experiencing pastimes with him. And he would even give spurti to his devotees here in Vrindavan. They would see him. So he was still going on in the pastimes within the heart, this feeling of separation. When you love someone so much and you think deeply of them 24 hours a day, that person is with you, and that's vipra-mukhyāḥ. Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.